How many of you have someone in your life who always has to brag when they're right and never admits when they're wrong? Chances are that person suffers from a lack of humility. Hi everyone, I'm Justin Johns, President and CEO of East Central Energy, and today we're going to talk a little bit about broadband internet. Just a couple of years ago, East Central Energy conducted a feasibility study to look into doing internet, and we made the decision at that time to not do it. There were a multitude of reasons, some of those you'll hear about in just a minute, but ultimately the circumstances of that situation changed over time, and we had the opportunity recently to relook at what that possibility might be and what the opportunities might be for our organization. And I'm proud that our organization exercised a high level of humility to realize that we might need to take a second look. So I'd urge you to do that in your life, and I'd like to turn this over to an interview recently conducted with Ty Houglum, East Central Energy's Vice President and Chief Information Officer.
Ty, thanks for talking with me today. I have a few questions for you about broadband, but first, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background at ECE?
Sure. I've been at ECE for 17 years, and most of that time has been spent in the IT department. I've been in the technology field for 24 years, and recently, last year, November of 2020, moved into the current role, Vice President and Chief Information Officer.
So a few years ago, I remember ECE saying that they weren't doing broadband. What changed?
It's a great question. In 2019, we did do a feasibility study, and at the time, the board appetite to get into that, get into broadband wasn't there. The funding was probably the biggest driver, and at the time, there wasn't significant funding available, which we would need in a broadband build-out of our scale. So that was the main reason for not moving forward. And then step forward into 2021, the significant change being the funding piece of it. And we also have a new executive team, a new CEO, a little different, looking through a little different lens, and then, but most, the biggest driver being the funding piece of it, that we're seeing quite a few different levels of funding from different areas, federal, state, and local.
During the November board meeting, the ECE board approved the next steps toward bringing broadband to ECE members. So what are the next steps?
Yeah, the next steps, we'll be working with a consultant to develop what we call an executable project plan. We call it an EPP. And that plan is what we need really to apply for a lot of the funding that is would be needed to move forward with this project. And so there's a technical aspect of it, of the engineering, how we would potentially put the fiber on our poles or bury the fiber. And so that's going to take a 3 to 4 month time frame to build that. And then within that time frame, we'll also be applying for some funding to see how that plays out.
So this means you will eventually be providing broadband to ECE members?
Not necessarily, and I think that's been a message that has been a little bit inaccurately portrayed in the media locally, and that's okay. We did take a next step forward, but that next step is really this EPP, and going through that process, looking at applying for funding. And then in the next 6 to 8 months, I would say, is our time frame to really have our board, give them something to approve or not approve in terms of actually getting into the broadband, industry and serving broadband to our members.
So considering all the competition that is out there working on building broadband networks, isn't it too late for ECE to get into providing broadband? Yeah,
when you look at our service territory, we serve 14 counties, and in a lot of those counties there's adequate fiber capability, there's high-speed internet throughout a lot of the municipalities and some of the denser populated areas. But when you look at the data, we still have, for instance, Kanabec County and Pine counties alone are counties 86 and 87 of 87 counties in terms of broadband availability. So we know that there are still, the Office of Broadband in the state of Minnesota refers to them as unserved or underserved, and that's really our focus is making sure that all of our members have access to high-speed internet. And our goal is to serve all members. It's not just to cherry pick and pick the dense areas. And so there obviously is competition, and it's a different industry, one that as electric cooperative we're not as familiar with. But the cooperative mindset is really what a big part of this, and that's why a lot of electric and telecom cooperatives have been targeted in terms of funding, because they know, whether it's a federal or state level, know that they can serve those members most efficiently, and they'll follow through with going to all members and not just the dense areas.
So how long will it take to build out this network?
So the original plan, or what we're looking at right now, would be a 5-year rollout. Keep in mind that's not in stone. That's what we're targeting. And we would have a phased approach to that. So we're looking at whether it be 3, 4, or 5 phases in that 5-year time frame. And really each phase would be build out, step back and look, and how are we doing in terms of financials, in terms of how many members are taking it based off of what we thought would take it, and really make sure that we're protecting our electric side of the business. Because one of the things we talk about with the board and within the organization is we cannot allow our electric side of the business to subsidize the broadband side. So, and that only happens, as we mentioned in the beginning, with funding.
So what type of speeds is ECE looking at?
That's still to be determined, but we definitely, our focus would be at a minimum to serve 100 by 100, which means 100 megabits per second on download speed and 100 megabits per second upload. And again, that's at a minimum. We would obviously offer gigabit services as well. And but it really will depend on the build out of the EPP and how that's designed. But for a lot of the funding that we have to apply for, you have to meet a certain requirement. And that speed we know right now is adequate, but we also want to build it to scale so we can future-proof it and know that as time goes on, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, we'll have members that might not be adequate enough. And it might need to scale to full gigabit service to all homes. But to start out, that's our minimum goal.
What could members expect to pay for an internet plan?
Yeah, it's similar to the speeds that we'll be offering. That's to be determined. I would just say that we will be competitive with the rest of the industry. Some of the counties we serve are a little economically depressed, and so we need to know that we can't provide a service for something that they can't afford. And so we know that will be a part of the project as we move into it.
All right, I have one last question for you. So would this be incorporated into ECE's electric business, or would it be a separate LLC?
Yeah, all these questions are, you could put a big TBD in front of them, but we're looking at both, and it certainly, we've been meeting with a lot of cooperatives throughout the United States to see how they're designing or how they have designed, and some are implementing, some have been implemented, have had broadband for a number of years, and it's really a mixed bag. We're seeing both, and that is a decision we need to make here in the next 6 to 8 months. There's benefits to both sides. If you want to protect the electric side of the business, obviously forming a separate LLC, but ultimately, this network isn't that we're building out. Broadband is one part of it, and it's a big part of it. But we also have the ability to increase communications on our electric side of the business. So we can focus on smart grid initiatives, so we can communicate to all of our downline devices. We have 36 substations, 54 AMI tower sites, which are the towers that communicate to our 80,000 plus meters out in the field. And so we have a lot of needs that are being met right now by cellular or other connectivity. And so all those things will be taken into account when we make that decision on whether we go in the electric side or separate the two businesses.
All right. Well, thank you, Ty. This is an exciting possibility for East Central Energy, and I am just looking forward to seeing how this unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
I hope you're as excited as I am about the news you just heard and about the potential for a project with broadband in East Central Energy's service territory. There's a lot of need for that product. There's a lot of need for high-speed internet in our service territory. Telehealth, remote work, kids doing school from home, all of these factors are a big reason why high-speed internet is important in our service territory. And it's my hope that if this project is successful, we can make a difference. East Central Energy has a long history of making a difference. Back in the late 30s, our first general manager, Buford Johnson, and some other people went door to door and collected $5 from people in the hopes that they could form an electric cooperative that would provide electricity. That dream became a reality, but a lot of people along the way probably thought it was a bad idea. We know now that it wasn't, and we know now that we couldn't live without it. And so I hope that as this project progresses, we're able to do something similar. I appreciate the opportunity to serve you, and we hope that your cooperative continues to bring value to you on a daily basis. Thank you.